Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for another top 10 here in the channel. This is my third day of the December top 10 marathon, and we're going to be doing a recreation of an old list I created purely because I have more to say about these figures. The old list was highly outdated in terms of quality and the actual list in of itself, so naturally that old list, well, it's been lost to the deletion files of YouTube, I guess, and instead you get this awesome updated version with my personal top 10 most surprising Skylanders to date, where we are going to be gauging an expectation I had of a character and a reality, and just which characters reality surpassed my expectations the most. That's what makes them surprising. These are the top 10 best Skylanders to no degree, but they are the top 10 best Skylanders that surpassed my expectations. And so without further ado, let's get in to the top 10 most surprising Skylanders. From my own personal experiences, everybody's list is going to be different, so please respect my list, and if you do so, I'll respect yours in the comment section below. And let's get to it now that that is off my chest. For number 10, I got Sharpshooter Terrafin, and my lack of expectations for this character stemmed from the fact that I didn't like the original version. I found his punches slow, his belly flop was a huge pace killer, and overall his attacks just didn't really flow. So besides being a boxer, which I could relate to given that I have boxed in my life beforehand, I just never really connected with the original Terrafin. So naturally I wasn't too excited for his reincarnation for the Superchargers iteration known as Sharpshooter Terrafin, but as soon as I started playing as this character, I was happily surprised by it, because the gameplay this time around, with the range from the turret itself, just added a lot more flow and pace to his moveset. It made him a lot more fun to play, it made him more fast-paced, and overall it took out those flaws I had with the original Terrafin, all whilst doing so with a pleasant surprise on my face. You could tell that I enjoyed this one a lot more than the original Terrafin right out the box, or at least I could tell that, mind you, hence why he's 10 on the list right here. Okay, let's make this voiceover quick, because I accidentally left my Double Trouble figurine at my University of Lincoln accommodation rather than bringing it here home where I am currently recording this video. But now with that out of the way, when it comes to Double Trouble here, there was a bad word of mouth at my primary school. A lot of people who liked Skylanders back there didn't like this character as much as the original 32 other Skylanders from Spyro's Adventure, of course. And naturally, that just gave me a bad impression of the character from the get-go. Plus, he was magic. We got magic in the starter pack. I never looked forward to elements that were the same as the starter pack figurines. And Double Trouble's design just was rather dull to me. Nothing but a masked magician, you could put it. You know, his huge wooden mask. It just felt a little uninspired. And so naturally, my excitement for this character was at an all-time low. But then I bought him and realised just how good the character is. In fact, specifically, I bought the Series 2 version from one of my mates who was so desperate to get rid of it. I paid 50 pence for it even, which was why it was an even more of a bigger surprise. He was that desperate to get rid of a £10 Skylander that I was able to get it from him for a measly 50 pence, basically next to nothing. And yet, when I started upgrading this character, he just got more and more overpowered. His magic bomb is ridiculous for crowd control, his doubles hone in on enemies and absolutely annihilate them, and his lock-on beam, which allows you to remain maneuverable and avoid enemy attacks while still dealing damage to them from a distance. It's just a stroke of genius. This guy's gameplay is far superior to what people would claim it was, at least back when I was younger, and the only way I could gauge how excited I was for a Skylander was based on design and what other people would say. And all I could say to that is young me was stupid, and I wish I got the character sooner, because he's just that good. And there's so much of a surprise in fact that he's number 9 on the list right here. But as for my number 8 with Gusto, it's the same situation as with Double Trouble, so I'm speaking with a voiceover as the gameplay is presented to you on screen. Now, Gusto is a character who, in comparison to the other Trapmasters, his design isn't nearly as good. He's just overly cartoony, you could say. And naturally, it wasn't a design that appealed to me, so I wasn't much looking forward to getting this figurine. In fact, I kept putting it off and putting it off until I finally got one when I bought the Trap Team 3DS Starter Pack. And for build up to it, I'm so glad when I finally got him, and he was so much more better than what the design would imply, because his boomerang is really overpowered. It can go through just entire hordes of enemies in front of you and then return, and that deals 2 waves of damage to each and every one of them. That is annihilative. Enemies around you, you can just spin your boomerang and deal damage to all of them with great crowd control options. You can suck in and blow back out enemies again. So overall, it's a gameplay that I find extremely narrative, extremely useful, extremely fun. Just everything that goes into making a good moveset can be found with Gusto, unlike his lackluster design. So that's what made him such a huge surprise for me. One of the, well, not even one of the, he has simply put the most surprising Trackmaster to me, having the greatest disparity between my expectations and the reality, more so than any other Trackmaster you could go as far to say. Number 7 is going to be Batspin. Now, out of all of the free-to-play characters, Batspin by far had the most dull design and name. Like, seriously, she's a bat that spins. I wonder how many brain cells it took to come up with that name. But despite her being the weakest of the 3, as soon as I started playing with her, I realised that her gameplay from 3 of them was by far the best. And that is what surprised me about this character, just how broken she is in combat. She can fire off bat projectiles, and then the more bat projectiles you fire off, the better, because that means that you can create a huge bat tornado, and it's bigger when there's more bat projectiles having been spawned. It's a really clever and really narrative moveset. Batspin is just very good at handling all of the enemies in front of her. In fact, the enemies in front of her, or to any side of her for that matter, are absolutely obliterated by the powerhouse that this character is. Hence why she was one of the biggest surprises for me, and she definitely deserves number 7 on this list right here. So number 6 is Stillfolk, purely because when I was younger and Spyro's Adventure first came out, I wasn't particularly excited by the idea of female Skylanders, and Stillfolk just kind of looked dull to me and not that interesting to play, so my apology about that stutter right there. But as I digress, when it comes to Stillfolk's gameplay, it is notoriously broken. She can self-heal herself, so between combat you can just stay still, self-heal yourself with no punishment to it whatsoever, and then prepare for the next combat scenario back at full health again. So she just simply doesn't die, and enemies in front of her, well, they are slashed to pieces within near seconds because of her high damage output. She is actually a phenomenal Skylander, and I was not expecting that, being young and stupid, and all what I saw in the design was a silly girl that I didn't have much interest in playing, being a boy, and boys always the best to boys. But with that being said, is ultimately how good that gameplay was and how much it surpassed my expectations, which made Stillfolk such a pleasant surprise for me. And I think nowadays, if I looked at the design, I would have just looked past the fact that she was a girl, but at the time, it most certainly was surprising that a girl to me could be this fun to play as, mind you. And that's just my silly gender bias, being a child and all that. Next up is Bad Juju. Now, it's not only her design, Next up on the list is Bad Juju. Now, it's not only her gameplay that surprised me, but it's also her design in general and her figurine. There is such a huge attention to detail. You can see that within those carvings, which my camera actually focuses, mind you. Even her blades have little damages on them, little scratches, to show that this character has been through her fair share of battles and is certainly battle ready and experienced. It just creates such a sharp personality for the character, not to mention the colours really contrast and pop. The blues and the purples, they're just really cool to look at and all that. It makes for a standout figurine. So naturally, the figurine surprised me, because out of all of the villains that they brought back from Trap Team, I thought Bad Juju was by far the most boring design-wise, and therefore it couldn't make for a good moveset. I was wrong on both accounts, because her moveset too is incredible, and it really has a huge skill ceiling for you to learn, and that's what I love about it most, because you can't just smash buttons with this character. You need to send out Juju Jr. and then bring him back and use the lines between him and yourself to knock back as much enemies as possible. On the return trip, you can even create lightning that deals damage to enemies around Juju Jr. whilst you slash down your own enemies down in front of Bad Juju herself. Overall, it's a really well thought through design, and it's really fun to really get to learn, and once you've learned it, she can be one of the most annihilative senseis in the whole of Imaginators, hence why she's one of the biggest surprises from the entire lineup for me. One of the more weaker villains I first concepted actually turned out to be one of the best the cast had to offer. Number 4, I have Chill, and unfortunately for this character I had the same gender bias going against her that I did for Stillfolk, but as soon as I started playing her I realised her projectiles were incredibly annihilative and they could really slow down enemies, like they'd have to get past her ice wall, or better yet they'd be frozen inside her ice wall if you chose the right path. Then you could use javelins even to deal huge amounts of damage from a far distance, and overall the gameplay was just a lot more fun and a lot more overpowered than I was expecting. Plus the design is phenomenal, just like Bad Juju, there's such a huge sheer sense of detail to her armour with the blue and silver contrasts, the blue lipstick on her face too. It adds a lot of personality and expression to the figurine, and overall Chill is just so much more a better Skylander than I was originally expecting, hence why she was a very pleasant surprise and earns number 4 on this list, mind you. For number 3, I have a Skylander who was so awesome, in fact, that he even got his legendary form, which is even more cooler looking because the black and the gold really suit this design, it feels like. But it's not just this colour palette which is awesome about him, it's the gameplay in general. Again, he can keep his distance very easily, his wolves can hone in on enemies, and his birds are a great projectile, and his boar might be slow, but it deals huge knockbacks so enemies can barely even get close, and whilst on your boar you can still initiate all the other attacks, so you're just as manoeuvrable and just as overpowered as always even. There is no downside to this gameplay, unlike what I was originally expecting, because when Swap Force first came out you could find just hordes of this character on store shelves, and it made me believe he wasn't very popular for the sheer reason that his gameplay wasn't very good, and I couldn't be more wrong. I even bought Zulu at the same time I bought Dunebug, and I thought Dunebug's design was far better, and this was back when I used to associate good designs with good characters, so I thought the design, well, I based solely in design even that Dunebug would be for better gameplay wise, but I couldn't have been, once again, more wrong. It's a common theme of this video, that, and so naturally Zulu not only surprised me, but he wound up being even better than Dunebug, which I never saw coming. So buying him and Dunebug at the same time, only to see Zulu overshadow Dunebug with just how good he is, was very pleasant for me and very surprising too, hence why Zulu has earned the bronze medal of this top 10 list, mind you. For number 2, I have Mr. Cat. Now let's be frank, this design is nothing to write home about, but for gameplay on the other hand, after having heard bad reviews towards this character, I thought the gameplay wasn't going to be anything special, but once I started picking up and playing with this character, I highly disregarded everything negative everyone had to say about this character, because it turns out his projectiles are powerful, his clones are powerful, his sneaking ability is powerful. Sure, it's not exactly original because it's just an amalgamation of other Skylander gameplays that came before him, like Double Trouble that we saw on the list already, or even Enigma to a certain degree, but it combines the best of all of those movesets to make something that's well-rounded and fun to play as. Mr. Cat wound up being a very pleasant surprise based on just how annihilative he could be. He's one of my favourite senseis from a gameplay standpoint, and never before I've even bought the figurine would I have ever have expected to say those very words, and that's what's so surprising about it really. Hence why the silver medal is definitely belonging to Mr. Cat over here. But finally, for number 1, I have Barbella, whose design is nothing to write home about. It's just another rock golem which we've seen time and time again, and not all of the rock golems in the earth element are even all that good to begin with. I thought we had another crusher on our hands whose slow movement speed would really slow down the pace of this character and make them an absolute ball fest to play. But when it comes to Barbella, she's fast-paced because of how well the moves flow together. Not to mention she's incredibly broken when you use those moves in conjunction with one another correctly. You can create just such annihilative combos, and that makes her so incredibly fun. She has projectiles, she has melee attacks, but you can't really use them effectively unless used together. It's a very clever moveset that really rewards you choosing to use different attacks rather than just mashing the primary button. And so this character is beyond fun. She is phenomenal on a gameplay standpoint, and never did I expect that to come out from a design that's this dull and unoriginal in comparison to other Earth Elemental Skylanders. And yet here she is, number 1 on my most surprising list, which is surprising in and of itself, but she's just that good despite my original expectations of the character. And so naturally I couldn't think of a more deserving victor of this list, and so the gold medal does indeed go to none other than Barbella. That all being said and done, this video is coming to an end, but before that happens, I first want to thank all my Blazing Knights and Scorching Dragons whose support allow me to continue pumping out quality videos like this one. Without them, this all wouldn't be possible. Therefore, I genuinely appreciate every last one of you from the bottom of my heart. If you enjoyed this video, I have others you can watch by clicking on screen now, and you can even subscribe by pressing the button on the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one, but until that moment arises, peace!